Fellow tennis nerds, today I'm here with another tennis nerd. So, you gearheads, I think you will enjoy this one. We have Beckett from Tenncom. I'm sure you're following this channel, very likely. I know that most of you are following many tennis channels, and I think that's great. You get different opinions, and that's what we're going to get into today. Talk about his tennis background, and then obviously a lot of racket and string talk and whatnot. He has a very good setup for his rackets in the back. But first of all, how are you today, man?
I'm awesome, Jonas. Thank you so much for having me on. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good. My uncle is a little bit of a health situation, so that's a little bit of a downer. But
Oh,
besides that, I'm healthy. I've been to the gym. I didn't play tennis today, but tomorrow I have something booked. So overall, pretty good.
yeah, I get all antsy when I don't get to play tennis every day in a row. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's funny how that addiction is so powerful. Like the tennis addiction, it's like once you get into it and you start playing quite, I mean, like 3, 4, 5 times a week, then it's like you can't be without it. Like 3 days passes, no tennis because of rain or whatever. Then you're like, oh, it's like a crack addict, right? Like what is happening? It's what's my
Well,
life
we
about?
just play in the rain because, like Vancouver, we're on the ocean. It feels like it rains 300 days a year here. It's not true, but we just play on this like unfinished asphalt court. It's super slippery. The balls get super heavy, but it's so hard to get courts here. All the indoor clubs in Vancouver have like 10-year waiting lists, or it'll be
Oh
like a
Jesus.
$100,000 buy-in to get on the list. It's crazy.
Yeah, I didn't know it was like that. Like, I mean, tennis is doing well in Canada, right? So, like, that's the feeling
Yeah,
with like your Gerald Sim, you have Shapo, Raonic before that. So it's tennis is doing good, but maybe too good because now all the courts are booked. Then.
yeah. Well, we have this whole population problem where the there even though there seems like there's so much space, like it's such a big country, the urban centers are filling up quite quickly. So there's like hardly any places to rent or buy a home. And we're seeing that with the tennis courts too. Like once it gets into summer, it's tough to be on a public court for more than 30, 45 minutes before someone else is ready for their turn.
Yeah, I don't. That's one of my when I lived in Stockholm. Like I've been living abroad for many years, but then we did 9 months, me and my wife and kid in Stockholm some years back, like 5 6 years back, and then like I remember like you have to start playing at 7 in the morning. It was very expensive, and at 7:55, when you're starting to groove a little bit and starting to feel the
Hmm.
ball, then someone is just lurking outside, like
Yeah.
some dirty man, and he's like, "Oh, I need to get on the court." Like, oh no, just like 20 minutes more, but there's no chance, right?
Yeah.
That's funny how that works. So tell me about your story with gear. Like, I mean, we can get into your tennis background as well, but like how, I mean, you know a lot about gear. You've been obsessing with about gear like me for many years.
Yeah.
But where did it start and how did this addiction
Uh,
started?
like my Tennis Warehouse user forum account is quite old. Like it might be 10, 15 years old. So I'm 27 now. So I got into it when I was a kid. I've always like I love cars. I like dumb like products and stuff. So I get super into them. And when I was a junior, I wanted a new racket or something. My dad's like, why don't you just try adding some lead tape? So that was when I started reading the forum for the first time, trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do. So I added those like Pete Sampras H strips they used to have to my Drive Z Lite, which is like a 255-gram racket. And that's kind of really where it started. And then I have always played tennis because my dad was a great player. So we would play together. And when I was in my halfway through university, I was looking for a part-time job. The tennis store was hiring. I wasn't playing a ton of tennis at this time. Um, but as soon as I started working at the shop, it was like kid in a candy store, going back on the forums, learning about poly hybrids, all that stuff. That's like super granular, but it's really fun, just to get a handle on everyone else's passion, I think.
Yeah, I think I mean, it's like when you are in a passion like this, like it's quite nerdy from the outside. I know when I'm talking to average person who's not playing tennis or maybe playing tennis like once a week or once a month or whatever, they're not into gear. they look at you like a crazy
Yeah.
person. You rock up with your bag and your tripod, and you like there's 8 different rackets. Like, who's this? This is insanity. Like, would anyone care about this? Is there any difference? Most people don't have any idea that there's a difference between rackets. They think it's just like different colors, you know. So I find
Yeah,
that quite interesting. Do you notice that as well when you're bringing your gear around?
it depends. Like we play on a lot of public courts here, so there'll be a lot of like very recreational players, and they're not super into it. But Vancouver is a very techie place. Um, there's Teslas everywhere, so I'm not the only one showing up all the time with a couple different rackets. I see people switching, and I get recognized pretty frequently just on the court. So, like, I know that the community here is like, at least, is pretty nerdy as far as things go.
That's cool. That means that they're dialed in, and that's good. I think in general, like getting gear knowledge out to people is helping, right? I mean, it's like if people play with the wrong racket, they get tennis elbow, they might play worse. But I felt always like, do you feel sometimes also? I don't know how often you switch rackets, but I'm in this period when I have a lot of racket reviewing to do. My whole place is full of rackets, and I feel like my tennis is just sometimes going down complete toilet drain, right? Because I'm just, oh, this racket, then this racket, then this racket, and I'm like,
Right.
oh, no consistency.
You don't like pick a main racket to sort of be your racket for a long period of time?
Yeah, I do. I try to stick to one, but it usually lasts like a few months, and then I get
Okay.
lured by something else. That's the problem. Like, I maybe have it 3 months. I'm like, okay, this is the one. This is the Radical, or this now the PT7A, which is very tough to use, obviously. And now I'm looking for a power racket, and I'm playing with the ESO 100, but it's like goes on ebbs and flows. It's like the craziness. And then I talked to my buddy Henrik, who's also sometimes on the channel, and he has the same situation where he's like, oh, I bought 4 of these. And I'm like, oh, great. And then 2 months later, he's like, oh, I bought 4 of these. I'm like, what happened to the blades? He's like, but I played 2 matches, it didn't work.
I try really hard to like pick a racket, customize it, and go, okay, this is my racket. I'm going to have a really high standard. Something else needs to come along that's like really better than it for my game, the way that I want to play tennis, which is not necessarily going to mean I'm going to win the most points, but it means that I have the most fun playing. So I've been using the Slinka Whiteout since May. And
That's pretty good, huh? Whoa, that's
yeah,
quite long.
not bad. Before that, I used Extreme Tour for like 2 years. So I'm pretty good about like, okay, this is going to be my setup for now. This is my baseline, because there's nothing worse for me than, you try to hit a couple times in a row, like 3 days in a row. And if you haven't found your groove on that third day, it's so painful for me.
Yeah, I know. I'm the same. Like yesterday, I had a really bad. Like I was playing with Ben from Tennis 101, one of the Instagram guys who does like some viral content, and yeah, no, I don't know. Like I had a brain malfunction, which happens to me from a frequent basis, and I was like, I'm testing the new Dunlops, and I really like the CX400 Tour, but then I also had to try like the Pure Strike 100. So, and I started mixing up, and then oh, you brought your Blade 98 V7. I remember that racket, and then it's all. It's too crazy sometimes. It's better to be more organized and dialed and say, okay, this is my racket. I use this for X amount of time if I'm doing a review or whatever. And I sometimes manage that, but sometimes my like passion for just I want to play with this racket today, it gets over. It takes over.
Did you get the specs on your new CXs? Because my 200 came in quite low.
Yeah, exactly. I mentioned that in a video I did, I think for the members for so far, but it might come out tomorrow for everyone. I think it was the same as yours, because I saw you had like 268 unstrung, right? Something like that.
262, yeah.
262. Okay, that's even lower. Mine was 268, but that's insane, right? So 268. Nikki, who did the review with me, wanted to throw it in the trash can, right? He was like,
I thought it was a mistake, because that's outrageous. Like that's a child's racket. But I think apparently 270 is like on spec.
Wow. Okay, so they really went. I thought that they would, because for the 200 is pretty difficult racket. Like a 98, I think should be used by pretty advanced players. Like you need to be able to handle that racket. Otherwise, you can use 100 or 104 or 100, whatever. But you can't have it with the swing weights. I mean, there's no stability in the racket inherent in the frame, so you need the swing weight to be higher. And if they're going to have that, they need to add like an instruction manual and a roll of lead tape for average people. I mean, we can
Yeah.
check the swing weight, but for someone who's like, oh yeah, I like a blade, but I want to change rackets, so I buy this Dunlop because it looks cool or whatever. And they go in there like, why? There's no stability. You know, I don't feel like my ball has anything on it. And and then my CX 400 Tour, which I preferred as an overall racket, that was 320 with strings, same strings, Solinco Hyper G round 125, and that was a great racket. Played well. Both me and Nikki, we liked it, but yeah, the CX 200, it needed like a half a roll of lead tape before it became kind of like what it should be, I think.
Yeah, I put 5 grams under the bumper first thing, so it was like 315 strung, and that was not enough either. Like I can feel like as soon as like Luca was going to push me around instantly because he can hit a pretty heavy forehand, and I had no control because the racket's just getting like deflected out of your hand right away. So for you, the 400 Tour is like the gem of that line right now.
Yeah, I like the previous version as well. I don't know, like sometimes I prefer these like 95s, like because they are, but they also need weight, you know. But they are very nice frames. Like, and they Dunlop has maintained, I think, or at least returned to a better feel. Like they had some lost years in my memory, like where it's, you know, after the aerogels and all that stuff, they did some have a dark period, you know. But now they're doing good rackets. I just feel like, you know, a 200. It needs to be like a blade a little bit hefty, you know, with the swing weight, like not obviously over 330 strong for most players, but still like you need it to be 325 for it to be playable. And then when it's not even 300, I mean, in your case, it was like 290 something, you know,
yeah, it's
with strings. You can, I mean, this has to be returned. Like it's almost like this has to go under some return policy, which I don't know if swing weight is covering. Like, because the swing weight can obviously, the weight and the balance can be somewhat okay, but the swing weight can be too low, way too low.
Well, if like I think 8 points under spec is fine. If like 270 unstrung is what they're going for, but I wonder like who's going to demo that and then want to commit to it, or who's going to buy it online. Like I find the more niche brands usually skew to a little bit more advanced player. So what kind of advanced player is going to feel inspired by this super light feeling racket? And I'm not sure what the development process on them always looks like, but it seems like a confusing market positioning to me.
Yeah, I struggle with that with a lot of brands. Like sometimes I feel like, okay, you know, you see this, you would say typical mistakes, but you see this mistake, you feel like this is a mistake. Like this is something that should have not been released this way, or not as frequently, or no, there's a few things that are like keep happening, you know, and like low swing weights, you know, on player rackets. Like I can understand if they bring out like a CX 600, 700 for like, you know, intermediate beginner, whatever, that level. That's fine that you have a low swing weight, 270. It's fine. Okay, you know, but for advanced players, it's going to be completely confusing. And then you have to label it as kind of like this is a pro stock that requires you to go to a customizer, or you to be quite good at customizing to match these frames, because you can't do much with a 260 something swing weight, you know, unstrung. So it's strange to I don't understand if they aim for 270. It's not. This stuff frustrates me a lot after so many years doing racket testing. It's like, oh my god, you know, this one you should be able to do by now, you know.
Yeah. Are you still kind of in that 330 strung range for your own sticks?
Yeah, I like that. It depends a little bit on the frame. Sometimes if the frame is very bulky, I feel like it can be a bit lower, because I mean, obviously you have higher twist weights and stuff on these thicker beams, power frames. But on control rackets, I mean, 325 is fine. I like the CX 400 Tour was playing fine with 321, I thought. Okay. Because it has a bit of a thicker beam. It's more like a speed, you know. So I thought that was good stick. I always liked that. I think that they also, you know, changed the mold, which was pretty good, I think, in this case. So yeah, it's a good stick. But it's going to be one of those that is underlooked, because people go to the CX200, you know, because that looks like the Blade player model, right?
Yeah, totally. And I think it's a bit weird to have the CX200 Tour as the like a medium weight, or like a normal weight. I find that a bit confusing personally.
Yeah, it's very confusing. So right now, so the Solinco, is it the 1820, or are you playing the more open 1619?
Yeah, I'm on the 1820. I never actually tried the 1619. What happened with my Switch there was Slinko reached out to me. They said, like, what can we provide you for a video? And I saw your review and a couple other people like love the 1820. So it's like, just send me the 1820. That's what everyone's interested in. Because I don't want to have like, I don't want to ever fill this up, because then it's just going to be everywhere. I just have one bedroom apartment, right? So that was the only one I ever tried, and it was like great. I got tons of spin. I couldn't ask for really any more spin, so I didn't feel like it was necessary to try the 1619. And then I can feel like I can string it looser, like 40, mid to high 40s, and feel like I have more than enough control.
Yeah, I think that's a modern like player profile. Like you go denser pattern, but then loosen up the tension. You're seeing all the tensions drop now across ATP Tour. Maybe balls, maybe arms. You know, a few of these things are taken into consideration. But it's also they're seeing players go lower. They're like, oh, maybe I should try getting a bit more on my shots. And I think for a lot of rec players, they also want to try it, but then it's a part of that control. Like if you don't hit with a lot of spin or your mechanics are a little bit off, then it's tougher to use low tensions, But how long have you been like in the 45-pound range around?
I've been up and down like for a long time, or since last winter to about fall. I was staying with my in-laws in Winnipeg, so it's a bit higher altitude there, and I felt like I needed to string tighter, so I was around 50, 52, depending on the racket. But now that I'm back at sea level, I definitely like the lower tension. And even I work on a project with Swing Vision that should be out in the next couple of weeks, and just like, hitting for 10, 15 minutes, one at 54 and one at 40, the average ball speed was 2 miles an hour higher with the lower tension. More balls were in, more balls were deep. There's like no trade-offs for me. So
yeah, I
why
think
not
it's
take?
like, yeah, I 100% agree. I think it's people don't realize like you don't like the polyester strings. They keep the control at really low tensions. I mean, look at Manarino, for example. But you can go to like reduce your tension quite a bit and still get like you might have a really minimal adjustment, and you're getting quite a lot out of it, and your arm is not being bothered by. You still see a lot of like rec players play like 55 pounds with poly and pure drive or arrows. That's something I counter. And a lot of these older guys, and they have the elbow pad just to it
Yeah.
looks like, yeah, if you see a sore elbow, you can spot it miles away, right?
Well, even I find a lot of the people that I meet who have the elbow problems, there's also some kind of crazy search for topspin between them. So I see so much like over torquing of the wrist. And that's what led to my elbow problem when I was testing Paradox Pro. It was like I wasn't getting the same kind of dip on the ball. Did you try that string too?
I haven't tried it actually. They said they were going to send it, but they haven't showed up. Let me know how does it play?
It's like RPM power, but
Ah,
even more exaggerated.
oh wow, that's a
So
bit like I mean RPM power. I like it. It almost feels like you're because I play guitar. You're like it's like you're stringing a violin or something. It's like this
yeah.
kind of
Oh,
the,
it doesn't sound like that though, thankfully.
that's good. Yeah,
Because
because RPM like you move the strings like pring prong pring prong. You're like interesting.
yeah, that was horrible. Pulling tension on the last couple crosses with RPM power is like the most painful stringing experience I've ever had, I think.
Yeah. Was I remember that was pretty rough. I did test it. It was I played nicely. I remember testing it was a long time ago, but in like the soft drive. But yeah, I remember not enjoying the stringing part of it, and that's also a thing. Like if you're gonna use a standard string, if you string yourself, and I know you do. I mean, it's like then it becomes quite important that it's also enjoyable experience. Especially if you have like an 1820. Like oh yeah, I have to
Yeah.
string this now.
Well, that's why I'm sick of stringing my 1820 Solinko because I have to do it. I have to do each of them almost once a week because there's so many new strings coming in all the time. And I'm not at that point yet where I feel like I want to do a lot of testing with other rackets. I just want to keep them kind of like in my main rackets. And I find these whiteouts are really string sensitive too, so I can really
They are.
feel the difference. But it's such a hassle. So I am actually like, if I can get my CX200 spec'd out nicely, I might switch to it coming up, but we'll see how it goes. It has not
Yeah.
taken weight that well so far.
I mean, the feeling is nice. Like I sometimes feel like it's a sad thing when you play with a racket and you're like, oh, I enjoy this. It has a lot of good qualities, but it's so under spec that you can't. Like my motto has always been like I'm gonna be honest, and try to see things from the good and the bad, but you try to be balanced. I don't want to trash anyone if they tried hard on the product, but if it's like completely pointless or just a marketing thing, it's I will say that, but sometimes you're like, oh, swing weight machine shows this. You can't. What can you say? It's just like it's obviously it's not good. You can't say anything else. It's quality control.
Yeah, and that's fine. Like, I don't mind that because it's like something that's, you could say, is objectively bad, right? Like nobody would be happy with something that's off spec. But I often, if I try a product and I don't like it, I won't make the video because I don't have the kind of like mental or creative energy to go, okay, I'm going to do a full production video on this product that like doesn't excite me at all because it doesn't stand up in any way.
I think that's smart in a way. I struggle sometimes, and we talked about this the other day with me and Ben, because I was like, he was testing some rackets for some brand, Wilson, I think it was, and I could see that he was not enjoying the testing process. Like it was a string and a racket, and he's maybe not so used to testing gear. And I know how it is. Like you have to kind of slug through the play test. Same with Henrik. Like we talk about it. Like, okay, I want to give this X amount of hours, but you're really struggling. Like it really is not a racket that might not be bad per se, but it doesn't suit you, and you feel like you're playing badly. And if you're playing competitive points or playing a set, even if it's a training match or something, you still feel like, here I am playing badly with a racket I don't want to hit with because I have to give a review of it. It doesn't mean like the racket is bad, because I know I can usually give it to someone and they're like, oh, you try it. Oh, it's great. I'm like, all right, well, that's me then, So
yeah,
it's interesting.
That's the whole thing. It's so subjective. Like I think the rackets that are made now are all quite good.
Yeah.
Like compared to 10 years ago, they feel like on average more solid, more refined, like it's a better product. So it's really hard to like come away from a review for me saying, I think, making these changes would sell more. I can say making these changes would work better for me, but I understand that my needs are going to be quite a bit different from the average consumer.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes you would, if you look at YouTube views and stuff, I'm not so good at this. Nicola, my buddy Aracic, is quite good at checking views, and like this channel is doing well, blah blah blah, which he's great at. And I'm not so good at that. But I think like if you would have like roast a lot of products, you probably get more views, but it might not be like your honest belief, or it might not be nice in the end, or you might have some negative brand of like personal branding consequences. But it's like you could probably have a channel where you have like a trash can and you'd be like, oh, this racket is shit, and you throw it in the trash can and people will be like, yeah, only old rackets are good.
Even I did my 2023 top countdown list, and I was the Shift 99 or the Shift 300 I put as my least favorite racket of last year. Didn't have fun with the play test. I get what they're trying to do, but it is not what I want from a racket. I have not lived that down. Like it's been several months, and I'm not sure. Like I don't even think the negative reviews and opinions, regardless of like if they're truly mean-spirited or if it's just kind of trying to have fun and self-aware that it's not, this isn't objectively bad. It's just like my experience I didn't love, which is the way that I try to go about this, can have a much more negative impact on your audience and the way that they perceive. It's funny. It's the way that they perceive how you perceive them if they choose to use that product that you don't like.
Yeah, it's a very good point. It's a thing where, I mean, obviously it can be fun to roast things, but it's also a reflection of you, and then it becomes a reflection of the people watching you. For example, like you said, because I've met a lot of, like, since I usually bring, the racket, I bring the racket bag or bags even sometimes. And then you meet people like, oh, is this the new arrow? Can I, go ahead, try it, And then I try to gather information, just like if some people have no experience, some people are really into stuff and want to be in the review. It depends a little bit, but then you realize like how subjective things are. So all you can do is try to, read it your way, tell people like, this is my subjective opinion, or we have 2 guys or 3 guys who tested this. These are our opinions, and take it or leave it. Yeah, it's not like there's no actual facts, besides the specifications and the swing weight and what you have. But a lot of it is subjective feeling about the racket. So, but some people want to feel like this racket is shit and this is a great racket, and this is like it's not that easy. It's not black and white usually.
No, there's totally a desire for there to be like a universal experience that we can talk about. But if you're testing in Spain and it's 21 degrees and I'm testing here, it's 10 degrees, we're going to have different experiences. Maybe my string machine's not calibrated. It's like way too loose and yours is right on. There's so much that can go on with the variables. And then I think the opponent changes how I feel about the racket too. Like, I know that if I don't play with 2 different people or 3 different people at a couple different levels, I can't understand how this racket plays. I need someone who hits harder than me and hits softer than me to really understand like how I can either take advantage of the racket by being aggressive, or if it's going to protect my floor from getting blown out, for example.
Yeah, I noticed that it's quite fascinating. Like, so I hit with my father, who's obviously a weaker player. He's 66 years old. So we play a few times a week, usually once, twice at least. He likes testing as well, but he plays with a racket that's too difficult for him, but he doesn't listen to me. So it's what it is. But then, so I test the racket, and his balls they're coming back, but they're not heavy. So I like, any racket. I can take a racket and I'm feeling like a god here, and then you know how it is. And then suddenly you play with someone who's slightly better than you or better than you, and the ball's coming faster, and you're like, I have no time to react, or the sweet spot's too small. Like, I own defense, I'm dead, And then you play with someone who's on your level, and then that opens up where you usually feel maybe where your racket should be, I think, is when you're playing guys that are your level. And if you beat them with that racket, you're feeling good playing it with it, I think that's a pretty good candidate. But playing someone much better or much worse, I think that is definitely not where you should base your opinions. That could be a good, like you say, a good guide for, is this racket good for this type of level or this type of style? But it's not going to be good for you choosing a racket, because that has to be beating people of your same level, I think, in general.
Yeah, like one of the big tests that I do is, I'm not sure if you've seen her, but Ali, who's one of the characters who appears on the channel. Yeah. So she's kind of former pro level, but we can hit pretty well. Like, she'll beat me like every time, but her balls are so heavy, they're pretty flat, and she really gets them deep. It's so good for testing like how consistent is the string bed going to be on a racket. Is this racket going to like twist because I get it off center, because I'm going to be late because I don't bend my knees, all this stuff. But that's fine, because I've played with her several times where, like, if I get a racket that I can just kind of deflect and counterpunch, then I can stay in the rally for 10 shots instead of just 4 or something.
Yeah, that's 100% true. I play with Nick, he's a better player. I play with some other guys, better players. And like, I noticed like I need more help then. Like, so I can't play well with my PT57As, which are very hyped rackets for a good reason in terms of feel. But then if you play someone equal or a little bit worse, it's fine. I'm going to play well with that. But as soon as I get a really heavy ball, like someone at that level or higher, then I feel like I have no chance. Then I need my ESO 100 or something like that. Then I would feel more at home. So that's the mess with rackets. And then you can play one day with the same racket and you're like, oh no, the ball's just flying now with the 100 square inch. So the kind of truth might be somewhere in between, but it's tough to go in between. I kind of like super control or super power. I don't know. It's like kind of keep like pinballing between them, right?
So you remind me that I haven't tried the PT57A yet, but I'm wondering, are there any rackets that, like, you have Grail rackets that you haven't even tried yet?
That's a good question, actually. I was going to ask you that. I wrote that down, like top 5 rackets of all times. It's type of video we both do, right? But it's I think that I haven't tried. Yeah, maybe there are some. I can't think of anyone right now, but I'm sure there are. There are players who be like, "Oh, have you tried this?" And I didn't try it. Like when my friend came here to visit me, he brought a Dunlop, what was it, Dunlop Biomimetic 200, and I made a review of that 200 plus, and plus means 100 square inch. I think it didn't mean longer rack.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So we played, and that racket was great. Yes, that was a typical racket that I completely had not tried before. I've tried a lot of rackets. I might have missed some pro stock or something like that. But I've been kind of just this pro stock and this pro stock and this, like the Steams I didn't try properly until now, and now I tried the Steam 100 and the 99.
But you don't have like a dream racket that you're like, before I die, I need to try like Feds 90 or something.
The Feds 90 would be fun to try, but I know it's going to be a nightmare like to play with against anyone good. But it's that would be amazing. I saw some guy posting that the stiffness is much lower on the Fed. At least one of the rackets. I don't know what's changed, but
yeah,
then
HD
the regular.
Tennis got, I think he got the N code paint job. I can't remember. He just got them last week. Yeah, he's the reviewer. He's in Australia.
Yeah, I know him. I mean, but so he got the personal Fed.
Yes, he got a personal Fed.
Wow. Yeah, that's a Grail. Like, I mean, I have personal Novak, Haas, Agassi, and Nikki has Rafa, Stan the Man, and a bunch of other like Delpo. I've tried all these, but the Fed, that's the Grail in my opinion. That would be a Grail, like a Fed personal racket. That would be cool.
Yeah, like I haven't tried a lot of the stuff. Like in Canada, the access is going to be a little bit less. I just tried like a 95D for the first time last summer, and that was a big deal for me. I was super excited, but I still haven't tried like PT57A or any of the Pro Tour 280 kind of original ones. I just tried like a DR98 for the first time last week because Luca brought it because he's a racketaholic. But he does have a Pro Tour 280, so I will try that soon.
Yeah, we talked about that. I think I remember that. Yeah, the DR90 is good. Actually, it's quite good. I see you have one in the back there. I see the liquid metal radical as well.
So we can walk over.
That's good. I like this. It's kind of a more animated podcast.
Okay.
Than just watching me talk to someone.
Okay, so let's start with the wall one. So this is the Arthur Ashe that I got at the thrift store. Which I don't play with, but I like it because it looks cool. But also, Arthur Ashe is the reason that I play tennis today. The only reason I play tennis is because of my dad. And so when he was in grade 4, he went to the bookstore. He was allowed to buy any book he wanted. He bought the Arthur Ashe book, found a tennis ball, practiced against his bedroom wall with a book and a ball, and then begged to get an Arthur Ashe racket. So my dad's Korean, so the whole, Arthur Ashe not being white was a big inspiring factor. So
that's great. Just wanna, before you move on, because this would be fun. But the Arthur Ashe I have as well. I don't have a very emotional reason, but I do find it to be a very attractive looking racket. So it hangs nicely on the wall with its like aluminum feel to it. And it's quite fun to play, but the sweet spot is like a peanut on that racket. Like it's literally, it's
really nice. It's good for kind of grooving your strokes. My girlfriend likes how it looks, so that's important. So this is like the GT Speed MP that I'm going to do like a Sinner thing on. This is Luca's, which I'm borrowing from him.
So it's the touch version, yeah?
Yeah, touch.
Awesome. That's a good one.
This is a N code, but it's like almost brand new. Like, I don't know if you can see the grommets.
Yeah, I can see it. It looks beautiful. That was my first serious racket, right? So I have an extra love.
I bought it from a family friend, and it hasn't been strung since 2007.
Oh, wow. Cool.
So it's got the stringing sticker from the store that I used to work at dated 2007, which is just crazy.
That cosmetic is just so timeless. I don't know. There's something about, maybe it's my like nostalgia kicking in, but it's like, it looks so good. It feels good in the hand. Everything's like,
It's one of the best looking rackets. And I think like, for me, like I didn't get into tennis. I was too young when Fed was using that. So like to me, it's kind of the K factor is Fed's racket. But as I'm kind of digesting getting older and like looking back at videos of him playing. To me, that's the one.
Yeah, it's the best guy to watch highlights from. It's like
Yeah.
the old Fed matches. It's so good.
This is another one that you would like, but this is
Yeah,
an
I
MP.
sold all mine like an idiot, but that's happened.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know. Don't ask. I don't know what I was thinking. I regret it.
I bought this from Luca before he started his YouTube channel.
Ah, smart. Now he regrets it.
Yeah, he does. It's one of his favorite rackets, and he sold them both.
It's an amazing, and also it's something about the feel. I like the glossiness, the feeling of the racket, like the control. It feels like just such a pristine, I wouldn't say artifact, but it feels like it's just there to play tennis with. And yeah, I don't know. That's hard to mimic in modern rackets. That kind of like good vibes, you get from that.
Do you ever like get to talk with the manufacturers, or like, do you know what the deal is with the lack of gloss paint?
I try to talk. I mean, sometimes I haven't really gotten a good reply, I think it's something that they don't want to share. I mean, like Head have been pretty welcoming in terms of like, I've been there twice, their headquarters, been walking around. Like Stefan is become a friend of mine, and he's a racket engineer. But obviously, I guess he's a little bit hamstrung on what he can say, and yeah. I don't want to be the guy who be like, oh, gotcha. Now it's going to be, friendship is a friendship. So, if they want to keep things private, I respect their IP as a company as well, right? But I am curious, because like that's the feeling of the racket I like personally. So like a video we're coming out now, we will test a bunch of other rackets. Like I didn't like the new speed paint, for example. I thought I was a bit, and I would have loved it to be glossy, but maybe I'm an old school guy and don't understand this stuff.
Well, the whole thing with the paint, like I thought Wilson CV, and that was going to be it. I thought we would never have to see this velvet paint again. It really didn't age well. It didn't seem like anyone loved it, but I guess here we are.
Yeah, I think they run circles around themselves. Like they oh, we have to come up with something, and then you have new people in the company maybe, or just like there's too many products released too frequently, right? So you have like these cycles that are too short, in my opinion. That's one of the things I've even told them. Like I just said like, better to do a bigger product release. Like it's a big, I mean, you can do cosmetics, whatever. People can buy it if they want a new black paint or whatever, every US Open. But just don't be so stressed releasing products, because then like if you feel like it's going in the wrong direction, or you're stressing and it's becoming less of what it could be, think it through. I mean, companies don't work like that. So it's just talking to nothing really in the end. But I just feel like sometimes they are a bit too fast with everything. It's not really gone through everything.
Yeah, I was really happy to see Yonex delay their E-Zone for a little bit. Like, I didn't even know what they were going to do, if they were going to make any changes. Like, the V-Core was so different. That was such a big overhaul. And everyone seems like quite happy with just the whole E-Zone lineup. To have like it refreshed or changed in some way to risk making it worse was concerning for me. So I'm glad they're taking their time. And like the Pure Strike update, they had almost 5 years for that, and I think that was really good.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's okay. People would be a bit disappointed. It looks the same. They changed the font on the side. They did a little bit of adjustment, but overall, like racket's a bit softer, feels a bit better, and they introduced like some new models, at least the 16, 20, 100, which I think is good. And the VS becomes the 97, which is more logical, so you're not confused every time they're talking about the VS models: Pure Drive VS, Pure Strike VS, Pure Arrow VS. So I mean, I prefer that they have fewer rackets, put a more effort, and then if they do something, they do it pretty big. And it might, I mean, I thought maybe the V-Course was a little bit of a too much in one direction for my personal taste, but I do applaud the effort. Like, I mean, like this V-Core is so different from the 2021 V-Course that I'm like, okay, you went for it, and this is fun. So people can like, okay, I'd rather that they actually have several models available to be like, oh, you want the 2021 V-Core, you want this V-Core, because it's, you don't need to completely overhaul, but if you do, it's a nice little risk of the company to do so, right?
Who do you think has like the best lineup right now?
That's a good question, actually. I thought about that a bit. Technofiber is a little bit confusing because TF40 and T-Fight both control rackets in many ways, and the TFX1 is not something they've been pushing as much so far, although they have Mute playing with it, and I think they can do like a TFX2 or whatever. It might be very good. No idea. But I like fewer rackets. I think Head have way too many. I've said that in many videos, I assume, right? It's just like oh, how many 98, 16, 19 rackets can we have? You know, it's like, it's before people get like, oh, Boom Pro, Radical Pro, this. Wilson is also a bit confusing with the Clash. Sometimes it's like they say it's a control racket. I would never say it's a control racket. It's a
Yeah.
comfort racket, in my opinion. It's like a bit of a, I would, yeah, it's a specific racket. Like it's hard to categorize it, but it's definitely more focused on comfort. So I would say like Yonex probably and Babola are my favorite. Like when it comes to the lines, it's just like, okay, we have control, power, and spin. I'm like, you don't need to confuse more. Like, don't add anything. That's fine.
And then within the line, there's a little bit of differentiation. It feels like there's something for everyone without having too much overlap. Although the percept, there's a lot of percepts now.
Yeah. I mean, the problem starts happening, I think, again, right? It was when you're introducing like 100 square inch control rackets that also have thicker beams, you know, like you have the Dunlop CX400 Tour that we talked about. It's like, okay, 23 millimeter beam, then you're in speed territory. Then you can actually argue maybe that head is a little bit more logical because they have that middle speed and it's different because of the width and stuff. But I do like you just power control and spin. It feels like it's easy to wrap your head around. Obviously, you're going to have a lot of models. So I don't know how you combat that. But I think also the companies, like they think the more rackets we have, the more people will buy, you know, because we're, you know, if you're a tennis nerd, you're going to be like, oh, maybe I would need a little bit more denser pattern, or maybe I would be a bit bigger head size, but the same racket. And then you have another purchase, right? So
I think especially with Yonex, there's a lot of people who like move just from Yonex to Yonex racket more. I get that more than like in my consultations. There's a lot of brand loyalty to Yonex.
Yeah, I think that's good. Like they should really get an applause for that. Like I think people, partly it's this kind of quality control. Maybe not so much with swing weight. I would say that they could improve their swing weight because I've had some egregious swing weights from Yonex. Although their quality in weight and balance, I think is leading of the big brands at least. But they do seem to build brand loyalty, whether it's made in Japan, whether it's that it's like good, well playing rackets, the head shape. Something stands out, so people will be like, okay, I like Yonex, I like the feeling of it. It just might be more of a E-Zone than a V-Core player, or I want to go Percept 100 instead of a V-Core 100. So I think that's what you want to do. I think I've seen that a little bit more with Babolat in the past. I don't know how they're doing now, to be fair, but it's like they've also had quite a strong brand loyalty. Like I'm a Babolat guy, I play only Babolat, you know, and stuff like that.
Right.
So that's quite important, I think, for the brands.
Yeah, like that's something you'd see in cars all the time. It's like people will stay within their brand because there's a certain feel. And I think Yonex has also done that pretty well. Like Yonex rackets, doesn't matter. I think if it's a V-Core, E-Zone, or Percept, like it feels like a Yonex racket. There's a certain way it vibrates and flexes that just feels really familiar, which I totally get.
What's your feeling like if you compare like older rackets, like some of the ones we looked at in your shelf? We can even go back to DR98. It's not that old, but like 6195 liquid metal radicals, and then compared to the new rackets that we actually already said the quality across the board is higher. Like, I mean, you don't get bad rackets today. I would say that with some confidence because like you don't see a lot of, okay, this is like you throw it in the trash. Chris from Tennis Warehouse, we talked about that on the podcast before. It's like, okay, the racket's going to be good. It might not be for me. It's going to be good. It might be less of a favorite than the previous generation. Yes, possibly, you know. But it's going to be a quality product because there's no way they're going to be able to sell it otherwise.
So there's a few things that are going on with the new rackets that I'm not a fan of. I think because there is so much stress about the elbow problems since we started to get stiffer, I found there was a bit of an overreaction in softening RA. And then I think they kind of realized that. So, and then along with the softening the RA, there's like a lot of dampening. Like I'm not that comfortable playing with like a really dampened and soft racket. And then the other thing that I don't like that we're seeing a lot of now is like variable flex, which like auxetic, like, okay, really stiff in the yoke and handle, and then we're going to have auxetic is really soft in the yoke and handle, and then we'll have graphene, which is really stiff in key areas. I find like that makes the hitting feel quite thin or like spongy or artificial. I think Wilson is guilty of it too. which understand for the clash because like it achieves its mission really well, but I really don't like how the shift is really soft when you hit a topspin and then feels really stiff when you kind of drive right through it. To me, that just leads to like an unpredictable kind of feel. Like I want to, when I'm playing with the racket, it doesn't matter if it has high control or if it's a big power racket or anything. Like I don't want the racket to surprise me after I've hit the shot. Like I want to go, oh, that felt terrible. And then it went into the net, just like it should.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be like, oh, that felt great. I know my footwork sucked, but the hitting feel was fine. I couldn't tell that I completely shanked it because the vibration dampening is too good.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you. Actually, it's one of the things I've been thinking about. Because also when you say these things about like what quality is very good, it comes with the caveat of the whole industry moving in the same direction all at once. It seems like a little bit, it's like, okay, so elbows is a big problem. People can't play tennis. I get it. It's a big problem. So then you get these frames that are, and I hear that also consultations. I hear that from like comments, whatever. It's like, yeah, I don't feel the ball, So people go back to the older rackets because they that's what we want. We want feedback. So you want that, like, okay, I hit a bad shot, I would be punished. I hit a good shot, I would be rewarded. That's what a tennis player wants. That's how you improve as a tennis player, understands your own game, develop your technique. And sometimes when I hit with these newer rackets, I feel like, okay, it's a good racket, like it's stable, it gives you ample power, it does all these things, but I'm not quite connected to the ball. So like some shots, like, oh, it landed in, like you said, like that's one of the things I've noticed. Like, oh, should I be happy now? I don't think so, really, because it doesn't give you the information where you feel like you're going to improve. We get that feedback, like, okay, I have to hit the shot. I get more under the ball, otherwise I don't get enough spin. Like, but then if the ball is just like a bit of a trampoline, it just lands in, and you're like, okay, well, how am I going to repeat this if I don't have that feedback? It's impossible.
Yeah, and I think like that's all I have ever chased playing tennis, is like that feeling of like hitting the ball in the center with your weight shifting forward, like pure contact. Like that's all I care about. Like I'm a rack player. I don't care if I win tournaments that much. I know I'm not gonna like be making money for playing tennis exclusively. I just like hitting down the middle. So I want a racket that like makes me feel so good once I've hit it in the middle. To me, that's like the chase that I'm after.
You were a Bubble guy in the past, right? Like that was how you began your journey, right? What's your feeling around the brand now and the recent rackets?
I find there's like a weird clunkiness to almost all of them. I don't know if that's the high twist weight, because I do see higher twist weights like on Tennis Warehouse's chart, and when I measure it, it feels quite heavy. So I haven't really shared this on a video, but I'll tell you, the motion that I find high twist weight is tough for me is going from like the back position here and then figuring out how you're going to open it.
Mm-hmm.
And for my forehand, which is quite whippy and wristy, I rely a lot on like being able to control the angle of my racket face and find the right kind of spin to apply to control the ball, because I don't really have as much control through like, I guess, pure clean ball striking like you, or like Nikki, who seems like a much flatter hitter, or Ali, who I hit with. So the Bablet rackets are really tough for that. I think the Pure Air 98 is amazing. I think it, like, you could easily say that's the best racket you can buy and would be great for winning points, but I don't love it. I do really like the new Pure Strike, how it feels and everything, but it's still like, there's a lot. The one that I tried had a 333 swing weight, felt like a really high twist weight. It was probably more racket than I could feel comfortable with using for my game.
Yeah, I did notice that playing with the Pure Strike the other day. Like I liked that it's like it's a little bit less stiffness. It's not like a plush feeling racket or where you feel the ball 100%, to be fair. But it's better, I would say, than the predecessor. However, it does feel a little bit clunky at times. Like the twist weight, I haven't measured the twist weight on that one because I just got it, but I feel like it just then forces your swing or makes it not so comfortable. And then like tennis is about like you put it really well. It's been my philosophy as well. It's like you want to enjoy playing tennis. You want to have a smile. I'm not a competitive guy, so I don't go there to win. I play some tournaments, ITF seniors and stuff like that, but I'm not there to win. I like the challenge of it, but I'm not going to be crazy about that or just start arguing line calls like a crazy person. Which you encounter quite a bit. But I do enjoy when the racket feels like a part of you, when you feel like connected to it and it does what you want it to do. And yeah, I've struggled with some modern rackets in that term, like we talked about. It's like it's some of them. That's why you sometimes you play with it for a while and you're like, okay, I'm getting more power, I'm getting more spin. I am a little bit tougher to beat for better players. But then you're not like, you have a period where like, I'm not really enjoying to hit the ball as much. Like if, for example, if you're just hitting, like if I'm hitting with my father, for example, it's I have to invent stuff to train myself. I train him, but I have to invent things where I need to improve. And then I want a racket that like feels good. So I feel like, wow, okay, just hitting the ball is just so much fun. I just enjoy it. So
yeah. So what racket do you think feels the best right now?
well, the new racket is like my P57A. It's the racket I played with for a while that I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to play with this all the time because it's like the best feeling. Obviously, sweet spot is minuscule, very tough with stability. In like if you hit off center, but when you hit center, it's like mwah, But modern rackets, yeah, it's a bit tough actually. Like the modern rackets, I really like the Dunlop CX400 Tour. It's probably been my most positive experience recently. I did struggle, like the blade is pretty good, but when I compare the V7 versus the V9 just with Ben the other day, I always was a fan of the V7. I think the ball pocketing is very addictive in that racket. I can see why others would argue against it, but it's a racket I really feels good to me. And I was playing with that, and I was playing with the V9, and I was playing with that, and I'm like, this is just better for me. This V7 is preferred, right? So
yeah,
I would like to have that feeling in a recent racket, but I haven't met any really bad rackets, but I haven't really met anything that is like that either. To me, in recent times, I would say. Like for example, the Radical MP, I like that a lot. I play pretty well with it. I won some tournament with it on the seniors side, and you feel like the ball goes pretty much where I want it to go, but it's not a racket that brings me a smile in the terms of feeling. There's no pocketing. There's like it's just it's good.
I find the hitting sound, like my turnoff is twofold. Like I had a hard time with spin modulation on my forehand with it, but it's super direct, which I really like. But the hitting sound was like really high pitched, I noticed. And then I
Yeah,
noticed they have sound grommets, whatever that is supposed to be.
No idea. But it's not like a really the sound is not the attractive feature, I would agree. And I think it comes like the vibrations are pretty high. So, and it's not like, I don't think it's a very arm friendly racket. I didn't have any arm issues with it, but I've heard people like, okay, they struggle a little bit. Maybe it's like, it's the vibrations frequency is so high that it emits this sound. I don't know. I haven't checked the vibration frequency, but I think the newer radicals compared to like the liquid metal, compared to these old ones, it's a different, ballpark, more power of course, but it's different.
Yeah, to me the Slinko 1820 is like the closest thing that I could find to something that felt like an older school racket. Like I think it feels a lot like it could be the spiritual successor to like the liquid metal Radical MP.
You play with the standard length version?
Yeah,
by the way.
it's too much racket for me to play with something long, and then I don't want to, like, if I'm testing multiple rackets every week, I don't want to have to switch lengths and then try to regroup my strokes. That was the main thing. I'm sure I could totally use it because it doesn't feel slow or anything, I don't find, but so much adjusting all the time, I don't want to add more to my plate,
No, I think that's smart. And then with the strings, you mentioned like you have to restring all the time. What string are you using right now? What is like your go-to string setup?
If I was to play a tournament, I would do Grapple Snake Tour M8. So that
good
was
choice.
I won a tournament last summer using that string. Felt really good with it. I like it because the last thing that I really want to do after I play a match is like come home and string a racket and be ready for the early morning the next day. So I think M8 like holds its playability throughout the tournament, and you maybe only have to string once or twice depending on how many matches you get, how long they are. And it's predictable, good blend of everything. Maybe no like wow factor for spin, but like I don't think that should really be the goal when you're trying to win points for a lot of people.
No, I think spin can, like you said, sometimes some people they exaggerate the importance of spin, because it's like, it's about getting the ball in with reliability, whether you're using a little spin or you're hitting flatter. It's about that like consistent feeling of, okay, I'm in the sweet spot, I'm hitting the ball. I think, obviously it's all about footwork, and it's also all about contact point, these kind of tennis fundamentals that people can easily forget when, because I can get people asking like, oh, but I'm, I can't get the ball in the court, so I need a spinnier string. And I'm like, if you can't get the ball in the court, it's probably not the string. It's how it is. It's so easy to, it's so easy to think like, oh, but if they really grabs the ball, then we can't cheat the game of tennis. It's not possible. We're working with the margins here.
That's why I struggle a lot with the kind of ultra spin oriented products. And even now, I find the arrows they don't like lend themselves that well to a spinny stroke, in my opinion.
No, I think like I've moved around a little bit on this one, but before it felt like, okay, if you have a really extreme spin, this should accentuate it. But why would you want to accentuate something you already have, right? So it might not make sense. I think it's like in the head you have Rafa, and you're like the way he hits the ball, and it's like he uses arrow because he's a spin player, blah blah blah. But I think sometimes for flatter hitting players, the arrows make even more sense because the ball has a little bit more launch. So you're not going to hit the tape of the net. While for some spin players, an 18-20 might make more sense because you already have enough spin, and that's going to help you with having a slightly lower launch angle. It's not going to be so easy to hit it maybe for the opponent. So I think it could sometimes be the opposite. You have to look at the opposite. You're like, okay, I'm an attacking player, but I hit this tape a lot. So then maybe you need a spin racket. Could be the solution.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. So I used the Aero Pro Drive for like 8 years with a small break of using a BLX blade. And I was playing against these guys who were one guy had just come back from playing D1 college tennis, and another guy, his brother went pro, his dad was pro, so he was like making his effort. And I couldn't keep up with them. I was pushing too much, and having that Aero Pro Drive spin friendly powerful racket was just like encouraging me to push harder. I thought, okay, I'll just play defense. The SV95 still like a spin racket, but not something you're going to play the same kind of tennis with the Aero Pro Drive. It forced me to step in, forced me to hit through my approaches. That's something that was a really big challenge for me in my tennis career, is like, how am I going to deal with this short ball? So now I feel like with the 18-20, I feel so much more encouraged to like go after it. And, you don't want to like hold back on your shot and then run into net thinking like, oh, I held back, now what?
Yeah, exactly. I think sometimes you notice that like when I switched between the rackets the other day, I played like, oh, I'm playing at these, so I'm testing the Aqua Knight just because it's a different cosmetic. And, I do enjoy the East 100 for some reason. Especially against better players. But then the balls were flying, I felt like. So, okay, and then I play with the Blade 98, the V7 version. And I'm like, okay, here I can go full. And I have to think, Because sometimes with the power, like the more power you get, like the more you have to adjust. And then it's not as instinctive, right? You can't throw yourself into the ball, which is the best feeling when you really like stepping on the gas. Although you might not be able to do that for like 90 minutes, 2-hour match. But that's a part of physical limitation. It's not like, I don't think having a very powerful racket and then trying to just adjust your swings all the time, I think it's gonna be difficult. I've tried playing tournaments like that, but sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't at all. But it feels a bit strange to hold back on swings somehow.
Like if you had to play a match to save your life after this chat right now, what's your setup?
I think I'll go with the PT7A. Those are the ones rackets then the string, it could be, could do Hyper G Soft, for example. Like they are not very string sensitive. I noticed, like I try hybrids. Like, okay, maybe if someone just strings it for me, I can ask like a natural gut, all the power hybrid or some round string, could be any round string really. But then, yeah, the PT57A, I've had moments where I've been playing around rackets, playing a tournament match, and then I'm down like 5-1, and I'm like, okay, I have to just put every ball in, and then I win 7-5 for a set. I'm like, okay,
Right.
The ball is not heavy, it's not going to be the hardest, but it's going to go where I want it to go. So I think that is very important when you're trying to be like Novak, you're trying to like just fight every ball back, so. But it's a little bit too demanding, to be fair. I know that as well, but it's the one with kind of, I get a smile on my face when I'm playing well.
Yeah, well, you answered in like 2 seconds. I thought that was gonna cause you to think for at least 5 seconds or something.
Yeah,
But
I could be, because now I've been trying to, so I have this constant thing in my tennis life where I'm like, okay, I need a more powerful racket. Like my friend Daniel, who's a very strong player, he was here. We were training for like almost every day for 2 hours, and he's playing. He went from like Fed 90, Prince
mhm.
Phantom 93P, like all these heavy rackets. He customized them even heavier. Then he went to an Angel TC 97, customized that. And then he's like, okay, he's playing on clay, German league, strong players. And then he's like, oh, I need more power. So now he has like a Pure Arrow VS, and it's like 360 grams with strings and super headlight, like super headlight. Like it's like 31 centimeters strong or something, like 10, 12 points, 10 points at least. And I tried it and I'm like, okay, it's quite fun to play with, but like he's just, I'm just adjusting my string. He's a very good athlete, right? So and I enjoyed it. I tried it in a match just for fun. It didn't go well, but I was like, okay, I can see what you like here, but it's not for me. But he's just, then he tried to really convince me, like, you need to also play with more powerful rackets because you're gonna play so much better. So so it's been a little bit. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna challenge you and we'll see. But yeah. So like points wise against strong players, like I play my best with the E zone. But then if I play, sometimes if I have to play a match of my life for against a same level player, which would be the most fair if you're fighting for your life, I guess like, yeah, then I'd be worried that the ball will start going, at some point, and I will start looking at the string and be like, oh, I need a more spinny string. So.
So is that in your head a lot when you're playing, like the idea that you could have maximized your setup with something else when you're playing?
Yeah, sadly, I've had moments where I've tried to unthink that, like I'm trying to really not focus, and that's probably like when I've just said, okay, I'm bring this like three. I had two radicals, so I radical MP new ones. I wasn't super excited by it, but I was playing well with, so I was like, okay, that's it. That's what I'm bringing, and then I'm playing matches, and I'm trying not to overthink anything about the equipment. I'm just like, and it did work for a while, and then suddenly you go back into this gear hell where you're like playing a practice match and you're looking at your racket like it's your main enemy.
Yeah.
That's so what about you? Like, what you would go the Solinko, I guess, then? Yes.
Yeah, I would go the Solinko as what I have dialed in right now. Because for me, the thing that gets in my head more than anything is like, is the weight setup correct? Way more than like, is this the right racket? So when I was trying to like, it took me a really long time to get the weight setup dialed in on my whiteouts, because the usual customization techniques that I did for my extremes and my V-Core 95s before that did not work in the same way, because the balance point's a bit higher. And then I was also learning about the whole recoil weight thing, and I was talking to the guy who started the forum about that, optimizing recoil weight. So I did like a bunch of tests to see, okay, does my ideal recoil weight line up with his chart? How is MGRI gonna affect my forehand? And that was like when I really took a long time to kind of figure out how I was going to tune my rackets. And so that was in my head through, like, I think I played 3 tournaments last summer. It was in my head through all of them. It was horrible.
Yeah, I think that's one of the best advice you can give to anyone who's like in the racket hell or jungle, or whatever you want to call it, is that you need to get it out of your head. And this happens to pro players. Like, I mean, I do talk a bit when I'm around the ATP tour, like, oh, you're talking to this guy, I'm wondering about my string choice, my tension, should I go for a bigger racket? Like, and these guys are established ATP pros, right? And you're like, oh, don't get in here. Like, don't it's not a good place to be. Like, as soon as you start to doubt like the equipment, it's partly an excuse, but it's also like it just distracts you from what you need to do to win a match, right? It's just the feeling I have, sometimes. Like, I should come with a warning label when you get into this, to like gear junkie, because like it's a performance sport, so you want to have fun playing. It's not like you're buying a new iPhone and like, this phone has the best photos, right? Or this computer has the best performance if you're playing video games. This is like something where you have to rely on this thing to help you play better tennis, so you can smile more when you're at home, right? So it's like it's a little bit different than other gear things, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, and I think like it takes so long to get used to a new racket. So when you see these guys switch it's the idea that you would have instant results after a switch, I think, is completely incorrect. Like it took Fed a long time to get used to his 97.
Yeah,
And
yeah, no,
then,
and that was very sobering. I think I agree. Yeah,
yeah,
it's people should realize.
most talented player of all time is maybe not, has taken at least one, if not 2 years to like get back to the level that he wanted to be at. And then you see like Chapo, who is changing rackets a bunch, like that's maybe not what he should be focusing on. And then not giving it maybe enough time to switch to that E zone, which I think made sense. But
Yeah, I agree.
I'm not
I
sure.
think it gets tricky for them because they like, okay, I feel like this is good, and then they're not. I mean, they're obviously not gear nerds, so they're gonna got nerd into that. And the tennis coaches around the tour that I've met, they're not gear nerds either. So you can either consult with someone, which they probably don't do enough, and it's like a big black hole. So they don't realize, like, okay, I need to give it time. Like they just, okay, this worked one match, and now I'm back to my old. And then sometimes you see them, like, obviously you get superstitious when you play tournament matches. So they're like, oh, I want to go back to my cosmetic, even. Like it becomes
Yeah,
so much of a superstition.
yeah,
Now I saw, I got a post on Instagram, like, oh, Diego Schwartzman is playing with his Graphene 360 cosmetic, the orange one. And it's only a head. I mean, the racket is the same, right? He hasn't done any changes, what I know. But he's like, okay, I won with this. I have lost 6 matches out of 7 with the other one, right, or something. And then he just wants to get back into that. Like it's just a thing to throw your head back into a good place, hopefully.
like I was shocked that Head was okay with Sinner not using the new speed for
Yeah,
the
that's for me
Australian
was
Open.
weird. Yeah,
It's like that's like the dream. They got him on the head card and he's winning, but
yeah, it's
I don't
strange.
know if we'll
Some
see him switch.
Yeah, sometimes it's weird with the equipments thing. So you wonder if it's like, do the player perceive a difference just with the cosmetic? Like, it's a glossy racket. It has 3 different, colors have moved a bit. Like on the speeds, they don't do a lot of changes to the actual cosmetic. Like it looks the same. Then they do the same glossy paint. They don't do that soft touch paint. So you would be like, oh, here, Yannick, play with these. And I had, it doesn't strike me as the guy who'd be like, oh, this is completely different. But then there's something bothering him probably, or maybe he like, because he wouldn't be a more pragmatic thing where I didn't get them on time, or the delivery guy for my head rackets was late, for the Australian Open. That wouldn't happen. So it has to be something feel based, or something in his head or in his heart or whatever that says, I'm not gonna be playing with the new one.
Worked out for him, I guess. So
Yeah. I mean, for them, they wouldn't care. And also, I think most consumers won't look at his racket and be like, oh, but that's not the latest speed, so I won't buy that one. I think
yeah,
they would
I
just
need the
buy.
one with the white in the throat, not in the middle. Big
Yeah,
difference.
it's funny. I'm going to ask you about your customization. Like you do a lot of that. You do the MGRI, but you have the graffiti. Is that what you're using?
Yeah, I'm using the graffiti. That's been a life-changing thing for me over the past year and a half, I guess now. So I use the swing weight thing several times a week. And then I really like their balance tuner. Just easy setup with the phone. And then the twist weight, I'm trying not to get too caught up in. I saw you got the Meteor Tune thing.
Yeah, I'm testing it. It's behind me here. It seems good. Like, I mean, I've never been a twist weight measurer so much. So for me, this is a new territory that might be dangerous to move into. I sometimes have to restrain myself because then you know how it is. Like your head starts getting all kinds of problems where it's more about your footwork. But of course, yes,
Yeah.
there's another aspect of your reviews you can add.
I saw the Meteor Tune has, it's not twist weight, but it's like right left distribution of weight.
It's
It's
like
not
spin weight minus something. Someone messaged me that it was different than what they have. That is pretty cool. I haven't really like gone into depth yet because I've been so busy. But it's like is that you can like get really automated measurements on like how to match rackets through their software, which you connect to
yeah,
so you have
that's
like
nice.
Bluetooth connection. So that seems pretty neat. I haven't tried it though, so I cannot say if it's good or bad. But it's gonna be the next kind of experiment. But takes time. So.
Yeah, something like that would take me forever to figure out. all the different workflow potentials for that. But yeah, so with the whole custom, have you read a little bit about the recoil weight
Yeah,
thread on the
I've like
tennis
the MGRI.
warehouse?
I've gotten sort of many questions and stuff, so I've been tinkering with that in the past.
Yeah,
But
have you tried to see if that table works out for you?
I did try it, and it did work in one way, but then I got kind of lost in it as a little bit as well. I started testing like, okay, this the 20.5, that like this. So I never really settled on something where this makes sense for my game. Maybe I need to revisit it. Partly I didn't want to open that can of worms also because
Yeah.
then the audience get even more confused, and I get even more confused, or that like, it starts becoming a thing of everybody needs to do it like this way. So I'm not sure, but did it help you? Like you actually did open the door for you in your racket search.
Um, I wouldn't say it opened a door, but it confirmed some things for me. So my Extreme Tour and my V Cores 95s, I customized them both, but I wasn't like super analytical with the way that I did that whole process. Like I just did it by feel. I was like, okay, I'll add a little bit of weight here, add a little bit of weight here. And then only recently when I saw his chart, I was like, okay, I want to know if like my last two rackets lined up because I spent a lot of time with each of them to get them right, and they were the same, and they both line up with the chart.
Yeah, I think that was something I actually reached out as well. Like the rackets I liked were remarkably similar. Like
Mm-hmm.
that in the specs, like if I would line up, a typical rackets for me, that would be a pretty clear pattern. I'm not sure it's going to work like that for everyone, but that was kind of the read. It was more of a confirmation. Okay, I'm this type of, my stroke is this. This, take it or leave it, right? Like how it is.
Yeah, I
Then
think you
obviously
need
you're
to
right.
have.
Is
Oh,
sorry.
I think you need to have um, like all, maybe finished strokes. Like you have to, if you have not settled on your forehand technique, it's going to be hard to go, okay, that's the setup for me for the rest of my life now.
Yeah, I for me it's been ever changing. Like you want to tweak things all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's just my nature. So then that gets tricky, and that's probably why I go gravitate to different rackets and want to discover what different things applies to different players like me or other people as well. Like so it becomes like an eternal discovery, and then like no player is quite set, so that can be a tricky. You need to kind of do it, and then you need to wait maybe 3 months, and then you see your 6 months, and then you do it again. So it needs to be maybe in your workflow
But
a little bit.
I guess I mean more like you don't have any uh, developmental flaws that are like where your forehand, you're not done learning how to hit a forehand, I guess, but you are done learning how to hit
Yeah,
forehands.
true. In a way, yes, you're right. Yeah, you're not gonna
That's
be
kind of
like,
what I mean.
yeah, exactly. So this thing with tennis is frustrating, but it's also like because I have a friend who's all obsessing with technique, like gear. It's like technique,
Hmm.
technique, technique. He's also been testing lots of gear. In the end, he settled on a candy cane,
Oh,
which is yeah, very difficult racket. Nicky advised against it, but yeah, so he's happy with this racket, and and then he's obsessing with technique, and then he's like looking at how to do this and this and this, and that can also be like a rabbit hole in itself, right? Like he's I would say he's new to tennis, he's been doing it for a while, but he's always trying to refine something, always trying, but it's so difficult to change technique. I mean, I've tried working on the back end or stuff, and you do change things, but it's such a slow burn. Like you really need to immerse yourself in the process and be like, okay, I'm gonna do 100 buckets of backhands or whatever. It's just
well,
like, we'll
you
think that
look
it's
like a
helpful.
completely different player from when I first started watching you.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of, and I was playing, like when I started my channel, I was not playing enough. I was pretty poor technically. I was not as good physically either. So for me, it's been also a journey of like, my life changed quite a bit because I was playing like once, twice a week, just doing some videos for fun. And like, I was always into gear. It's always been a fun like rabbit hole for me to dive into and to investigate. And then I got to know Henrik, and we started talking a lot about it, and other people who are also nerds. So it was kind of like this thing. But then I realized I need to like now I started playing, like doing this more full time, was like, or at least half time. It's like 4 or 5 times a week playing, and then with better players. So you're like, okay, I have to get better. Like I have to fix. So it's been my challenge to myself to try to improve my game a lot. And now I'm feeling I'm making strides in the right direction. But then like it's not going to be easy to change like take back or certain things. But you optimize a little bit the footwork, a little bit faster. You're a little bit more smart how you play the points, which is sadly not something I am really. But it's like you're slowly getting a bit better. But
Yeah.
it requires a lot of quantity. I think it's tough to improve it as a tennis player if you play twice a week. It's really tough.
I think twice a week is only enough to maintain your level. And
Yeah.
even that can be tough depending on what level you are. Like twice a week to maintain like a 5.0 level twice a week, I don't know if you could even do that, because you also need to be really fit for 5.0 tennis. So you probably are like working out on the side or something. And then even for us, like constant adjustments to racket gear, like anytime you add an adjustment, I think that slows your progress.
Yeah, 100%. Like that's something that really sometimes irks me. And I feel like a little bit negative. I'm usually a very positive person, like generally like always trying to look at the, half full glass thing. But sometimes like when I'm in a testing phase and I'm getting confused and I like 2 weeks earlier, I was like, oh, I have my racket. But then there's too many rackets to test. And I'm starting to get like, my tennis starts becoming a little bit all over the place. And then I start getting frustrated. That's like a tough grind. It's a fun, like, I mean, it's a great job. Like people are, I'm happy, but it's sometimes can be frustrating that you're not playing your optimal tennis because you're like, this is not the racket and this is not racket, this is not the string or whatever.
Yeah, and there's no way to like sound good when you say, I sucked with this racket and it was not my fault.
Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, like that's the thing. Like it's like going on a date. It's like you meet and you're like, okay, it's could be good, and then you're playing and you're like, no, I mean, it's not. Sometimes you have to give it time, but that first feeling is rarely gonna be from I'm not really into this to let's get married, right? It's not. That's rare, that transition that it's going from
Have
like I
you
don't even
ever
like
had
this
that
racket.
happen? Like with the racket, obviously.
It's a good question, actually. I don't think so. I think generally my first instinct stays. I sometimes a bit too harsh in the beginning. My first time with the racket, I'm feeling like, okay, I'm a bit harsh, and then I need a few more times to kind of dial in like what I'm thinking and different players and
Mm-hmm.
But I never been complete 360 where it's like, oh, piece of shit, and then like, oh, I love this. This is the best racket ever. Sometimes I have a lot of the one like, oh, it's a great racket, and then it's okay racket.
Yeah, so that happens to me all the time. And I think it's when you try the new racket, because it's like the first thing, something's new, your body really adapts quickly. This is based on nothing but my own experience. And then kind of as you've played with that racket for a couple times, I think your body kind of goes back into its older habits, and then it doesn't feel quite as comfortable. That's what I noticed with like the Pure Strike VS, which I really liked for a long time, and then just couldn't quite get it to work how I wanted, even though it felt like it worked better than I wanted the first couple times I hit it.
Yeah, there's that feeling of like this is new. I mean, that's with any shiny new object. You talk about cars, whatever. If you're into camera equipment, what else? I mean, guitars for me can be like wow, but it's like, and then you have that extra energy also in your play, right? So you're a bit excited by the racket, so you're putting the extra effort into your play, and you're thinking that it's partly the racket feels better because you're moving better and you're putting more energy into your tennis. And then when you get back to normal and things start like that honeymoon period is done, that you start, oh, well, it wasn't the racket as much. It was my more excitement coupled with the racket that was
Mm-hmm.
a little bit that. You don't get that with every racket though. I noticed that. Like you test rackets, you bring out, okay, it's a good racket, but you don't get that feeling. And sometimes you get that feeling, and then it's really dangerous because then you feel like I'm playing so well. I mean, I finally found my new racket, and 3 weeks later, you're like, yeah, it's a good racket.
Yeah. I think for me, the racket that I turned around the most on was like the Bolt rackets.
Oh yeah. But was like in a good or like bad sense? Where did you go from first
Well,
hit?
I thought this is going to be stupid. And then I hit it, and it was exactly what I expected. But as I kind of figured out that whole suspension thing, I was like, okay, I appreciate what's going on here, and it's not going to work for me, but they're so fun, and that's a racket that like I like to keep in my bag to show people because it's really quite interesting and it's one of the most unique experiences, I think.
Yeah, me too. I think we had a similar feeling. Like, I think I was ready to roast the racket in my head. You know, I'm trying to keep an open mind, but I'm like, okay, gimmick probably. That's what I
Hmm.
was feeling. And then you hit with it, and I'm like, okay, well, there's something going on here. It feels quite nice. Like the sweet spot feels, it feels like something is different here with this racket, not in a bad way. And it like that kept like there is some trampolining. It does some things that I don't want in a racket, but overall, it's also a fun racket to use, and it's a racket that I think has enough innovation and new thinking that you're like you get like, oh, I'm happy this is existing. I'm happy someone tried this, that it's like doing something different, and I think that's cool. Like that's a cool product.
And I like really admire how passionate the founder of Bolt is. And like some people put out a product and it might have some kind of gimmicky thing in it, and they're kind of self-aware about that it's a gimmick. I don't get that feeling from him. I feel like it's really honest attempt at like serious innovation. And he's really passionate about tennis as a whole, like every part of it, which that was something that really helped me see that there was more going on to it than the, lackluster website and the weird paint jobs and stuff.
Yeah, I think so. I think sometimes you have to meet the people behind it. It's so easy to roast something or feel negative about something, and then you actually see what went into it and you feel a bit differently. Might not completely color your expectations or your opinion, but it's still like, even like when I sat down with the head guys like Stefan and Ralph, they've been working with rackets for like 17, 18 years for head, as engineers. And I could be like, oh, I'm not super impressed by this new head. Like, they're making minor tweaks to every racket. I'm getting a little bit bored. I mean, they're good rackets, all of them, but it's like not, floating the boat so much, right? But then you meet them and you hear them talk about like Oxetic 2 and Oxetic 1 and graphene and like this and other things that have been trashed in the pipeline or whatever. And I'm like, okay, like this is cool. Like this, like they are real engineers. They love this stuff. Like
Okay, that's
it feels
awesome.
much better.
Yeah.
Because outside from a company perspective, Wilson Head, blah blah whatever, sometimes feels like, okay, you're just chilling out new products and marketing ideas to sell more of this product. But when you actually meet the engineers, it's almost like it's a happy sensation of being like, okay, they wanted something with this. Like what the marketing department did, what they wanted from sales, how rushed the product was, that's one thing. But these guys were actually putting their heart and soul into the product because they're also tennis players and they also love rackets. So I think that's pretty cool. Sometimes can be quite eye-opening.
Yeah, when I spoke with the Solenko engineer for the whiteout, um, and one thing that I thought was funny, I was kind of expecting for that racket, because I find it's quite unique in the market, like a more like holistic vision, like someone who had an idea and then went to go execute it, but it was like a totally different development process. It was very much, we'll make a racket a couple different ways, we'll group test it, use that feedback. There wasn't like a guiding messiah vision for the frame. It was very much group testing.
Which is cool. Like, I mean, I think people sometimes don't realize how much they actually test the products on and off with different types
Mm-hmm.
of players, different types, of demographics to actually see that the product works. So then it's like, I think you always have to humble yourself a little bit when you test a product. It's not always easy because there's so many rackets being released or strings in one go because it's like Australian Open or it's, play season and like, oh, now we're all going to bring out new rackets. But that was actually like a 2-year process where the team did this, they discussed the cosmetic. It's quite a complicated thing because it's a big investment behind the product. So it's sometimes a bit too easy to be like a content creator or whatever and be like, oh, it's crap.
Mm-hmm.
But they poured out so much
Yeah.
heart and passion into the racket. So yeah, you have to find that balance of being like objective, like in a one way, but also understanding that it comes from a good place. Whether it missed the mark for you or not, it's another story, right?
What would you like to see out of like Jonas signature edition racket?
Yeah, it's a good question. Like, what would be something I love about, like, if I would copy something, it would be like H22. I like a lot, but I would make it a bit more forgiving, maybe like an 18-19 pattern, somewhere in between there, and then tiny bit thicker beam. I don't know. Maybe lower weight. It's maybe stiffer. Like, I would play around a little bit. Like, there's some role model rackets. H22 is one of my favorite rackets. PT7A. So I would like to maybe try to make a PT7A with a 98 square inch head that is
Right.
not too noodly and stuff. It's tough because I've realized over the years, it's like, if you try to make, or you take like Andy did, he takes the PT7A that he likes the feeling of it, and he tries to make it into a bigger racket, like with the Head Prestige MP Light, with that layup. And then I know, like, Ilya Vashka was here, and Nikki customized his rackets, and it is Andy's old rackets, or the same rackets. And we hit a little bit, like, you felt it, and they're like, it's a bit mushy, whatever you want to call it. Like, it feels like you can't trust the string bed, and then the pros sometimes get crazy about it. Like, I mean, he was dialing in moving weights like 1 centimeter here just with the same specs. It's like, if I move the lead tape up a little bit, like, as the player, like, it's a top 100 player who's that much into gear. So there are these guys around, right? They get into it, hardcore. But yeah, it wasn't like, it's a racket. You have a racket, and you're like, okay, this would be even better if you make it into a bigger head size. But then it doesn't turn into the same racket. Like, it's a tricky one. Like, I sometimes struggle, like, I would like a 6-195, but in a 98. But what is that racket then? Like, does it become like the 100 where it's a little bit too much power or a little bit too much open string? But it's a tricky one. Like, you like, okay, a 6-195 in a 98 with 22 millimeter beam. That would be pretty good. Mid 60 stiffness. It's like a bit stiffer.
Yeah,
that would be good.
I guess it's impossible other than just to guess what spec changes would actually play like.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's such a mysterious, subjective realm, which also makes it fascinating, that you're like, the perfect racket, and then you're thinking in your head, and but you don't know how that would actually play when you're actually picking it up. It's like someone might put the layup and the specs together for you, and here you go, and you're like, this was big disappointment. I thought it was play exactly like the old one, but something has changed, so it won't play the same, right? So yeah, I don't know. It's a fascinating topic, though, in a way. For you, what would be your ideal, if you could pick your dream frame?
Like, I would really just like Pure Aero 98 or VS with dampening removed and a lower twist weight or something. I would be really happy with that. Or even like more of like an extreme tour pattern, like a little bit denser in the middle and then opens up. Something like that. Like, I'm chasing like Aero Pro Drive Original kind of feel.
Oh yeah, it's the best. That's one of the best. Like, that one with a smaller head, like a 98 Aero Pro Drive Original. That's a go-to frame, I would say. Yes. Maybe slightly reduction in stiffness, because then the stiffness will be very high with a smaller head. But yeah, that's another one where, because that crisper feeling, where, I mean, there's something about the Aero Pro Drive Original where it's like, when you hit well with that racket, it's just, you can't beat that. Like, the sensation where the ball is going with some good pop on it, but it's still controlled. Yeah. It's just hard to beat.
There's something about with those, 2000s and 90s rackets that has like a really kind of graphite-y kind of feel. And I think that's one of the things that's been lost, as there's been more dampening, like we were talking about earlier, more variable flexing.
Yeah, 100%. I sometimes feel it with that racket, which is one of the best examples of that, even some 6-195s maybe. But it's that, like, it almost feels like the graphite kind of sparkles like water in the frame when you hit the ball. It's like there's some like, that's why you say crisp maybe. It's like it's someone's eating Pringles, or something is happening inside the frame that is just had like beautiful sensation and sound, that is tough to mimic. There's nothing there. It's just the graphite. It's just the graphite working. That's it, Poetic.
Okay. Well, it's been an hour and a half. How are you?
Yeah, I have to go to dinner, actually. My friends are waiting. But we can probably talk for 40 hours, but we will do that next time. We can do a part 2 or something.
It was super fun. It's an honor. I've always wanted to have some face-to-face time with you since I was like a teenager. So you're in Marbella, right?
Yeah, Spain right now, yes.
Okay. I want
So
to.
if you're coming by, Luca and you going on a road trip, we'll hit some balls, do some videos. That would be fun.
Yeah, that's something I
I'm not
want to
sure.
do.
Like, it would be fun to go to Canada for some masters or something, but I don't, I'm not sure when that can happen. But I would like to go to like Indian Wells and stuff, but it's tough. You don't get any press passes. You don't get like,
Yeah, they're
there's no.
pretty cutthroat. Even
Yeah,
even if like you're in Toronto, it's like so far to
yeah.
like it's 6 hours additional flight time to get
It's a
here.
big place. Yeah, yeah. It's
Um,
crazy.
so
Europe can be good in that sense. Like, things are a little bit more nestled together, so you can take 1 hour flights, boom, boom, boom. In between. If you do a Europe tour, like go to Rome, or like the clay stuff here can be quite fun.
yeah, I know my dad's feeling pretty adventurous lately, so we'll see how his schedule opens up.
That's good. Well, nice talking to you, man. It's been great. Good luck on the channel. I'm gonna put it in the show notes and the comments as well. People
Awesome,
probably
thank
already
you.
follow you, which is, I think these tend to overlap the audiences, which is
I
which is
think
also
so,
fun. It's a
but
community.
they'll love it. I
Yeah, they
think.
will love it. Thanks, man. You have a nice day,
You
and
too.
we'll keep in touch. Okay.
Sounds good.